Hello and welcome to another episode of Pakistanomy. My name is Uzair, and if you are tuning in on YouTube on video, you kind of can see our guest and you are familiar with him. Ali Farid Khwaja is Chairman of KTrade Securities and has been on this podcast before, a couple of times before, so this is his third time. And I wanted to have this conversation a couple of weeks ago, but then travel schedules and other things got in the way because what was in the news at that time and still is in the news on and off is the fact that Pakistan and Saudi Arabia are discussing multiple rounds of investments into Pakistani assets. The Pakistani Prime Minister has met the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, there was a couple of delegations that have visited Pakistan as well. And there was a conversation that sometime in May, the Crown Prince might come to Islamabad as well as part of cementing those deals. That trip has been delayed, so leading to a lot of speculation and noise. And so I figured that having Ali join us to sort of tell us the signal from the noise would be very important on this important topic. So, Ali, welcome back to Pakistanomy and thank you so much for taking out the time.
It's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you there.
So let's jump right in. So, obviously a lot of noise in the mainstream, particularly Pakistani media. So maybe I would love to have you start off with sort of for the average listener, catch them up to speed about what is going on and where the conversation or what is driving this conversation between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. And then we can go into the details as we proceed in this conversation.
The signal is actually quite clear and quite loud, clear, and visible. But the noise is more on social media, more by actors who want to create noise for the sake of creating noise. So the history of this engagement goes back in time when the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman came to Pakistan when Imran Khan was in power, and he promised that Saudi will invest around $25 billion in Pakistan. Um, then, because of political issues, those plans got delayed. If you remember, the Crown Prince was supposed to come even in around October 2022. And since then, his visits have been postponed and no new dates was given. And so the plans are not new. The plans have been in the press and have been announced publicly a few years back. And perhaps that's why there is still some skepticism now in Pakistan that whether the plans are real or not, because a lot of time has passed since then. Nevertheless, maybe I said it in one of your podcasts, or I said it somewhere else, that from Saudi perspective, when a crown prince says that when he gives his word that he's going to invest a certain amount of money, then his word is a bond, and that's what being royal means. And they are serious about their plans. They are clear about their plans, and they have done a lot of work on where they want to invest and why they want to invest. So at least from the Saudi side, there is absolutely a clarity. In fact, not just clarity. I'm aware that they have deep plans in terms of they've done a lot of homework on these investments which they want to do in Pakistan. So they are not something which is trivial or something which has just come up. It's something which they have done serious planning about that, and I hope that it will come through soon now.
And thanks for that overview. So, I mean, that's also broadly linked to Saudi Arabia's own strategy, right? With PIF and the goals that they have about deploying the vast amount of sovereign wealth reserves that they have into profitable enterprises, into good investments, particularly in emerging markets, but also in countries that are strategically important to Saudi Arabia. Egypt being another case in point is something that we've seen a lot of action on as well. You said that a lot of homework has been done from the Saudi side on what they want to do. Again, in the mainstream, there has been a conversation, as you alluded to, that this conversation goes years back about an oil refinery in Gwadar. That's one thing that continues to come up. Rico Dick, since the issue has been settled, Saudi Arabia potentially buying Pakistan's stake, not Barrick Gold's stake, in the Rico Dick asset, is another thing that has come up. Some indications that if Pakistan were to embark on a broader privatization agenda, then Saudi Arabia could buy up some of these assets, particularly in the energy distribution side. Those are again my sense as an outsider to sort of from the headlines, but help inform the audience a bit more about what are the assets or the sectors in which there is more pronounced interest from Saudi Arabia, and why does that interest exist?
So yes, you're right that essentially there are two parts of the question which is which you talked about. One thing is that Saudi itself has a Vision 2030 plan. The remarkable thing about Vision 2030 plan is that it's very in depth and it's publicly available. So you can go on the website, you'll be able to find the whole document. It has three objectives: to create a vibrant society, a thriving economy, and an ambitious nation. And it's not a high level plan like the plans which we have in Pakistan, but it's a very specific one, more similar to the Chinese 10-year plans. So you have yearly KPIs for each sector, for each vertical, broken down for every year for the next 7 years now, 6 years now. So that can give you an understanding of what Saudi wants. So, for example, one of their goals is to increase the population of Riyadh by 7.5 million, to double the population of Riyadh. They want to make Riyadh a top 10 city in terms of economic size. They want to increase the number of tourists in Riyadh to 40 million. They want to increase the overall number of tourists in Saudi Arabia to 150 million. So these targets tell you that in order to, if you look at the targets, they require integration with the region. They require more movement of people from populous countries around Saudi Arabia. Clearly, like 7.5 million people are not going to migrate from UK or US to Saudi Arabia.
If I may interrupt, just for the audience, just a quick way to understanding this very important point, that roughly 3.5 billion people live within a 5-hour, 6-hour flight of Saudi Arabia right now.
Absolutely, and the Saudi the main attraction of Saudi for those tourists is religious tourism. So they expect around 40 million religious tourists to come. So there is indeed a role of Pakistan as well as other countries, including India, in making Vision 2030 a reality. And so that's one part of it. The second part of your comment was that yes, there's strategic engagement with some Muslim countries. Egypt is one of them. Iraq is another. Jordan is another one. Uzbekistan is another one. And Pakistan is amongst those countries which are included in this kind of engagement. Now, coming to your last part of your question in terms of where is the Saudi engagement primarily going to focus on, there are 6 verticals on which there is more clarity, or at least on the G2G engagement. The first one, the Saudi refinery project, which for which Pakistan needed to have a refinery policy. And that's why we came up with a new refinery policy in order to facilitate that investment. The second is the mining project, Reko. I suspect that it might not even be a sale of government of Pakistan's stake. It might be new money coming into the company, which will dilute government of Pakistan's stake in it. At least that's what the Saudis want. The government of Pakistan might want to sell its stake, but the Saudis want to put in new money. So that's the second sector. The third is agriculture. Very high priority sector for the Saudis for food security. We saw rice exports increasing to Saudi this year. Pakistan had record high exports of rice. So that was perhaps a function of this. So agri is the third sector. The fourth is technology. And I suspect you will see Saudi national champions such as ILM get more involved in Pakistan. The fourth, so this was the fourth sector. The fifth is power, renewables, broadly the power sector, and and lastly logistics, because you can't, if you're buying the mine over here, you need to move the resources from there. So you need some kind of efficient logistics, whether that's ports or whether that's railway or whether that's some kind of aviation structure. So, but you need to have a very comprehensive policy around what kind of logistics infrastructure you have. So this is the G2G engagement. Besides that, of course, we know that SAMA has been helping Pakistan by giving deposits to Pakistan. They're commercially on commercial rates, but still they're helping. And Saudi is also helping in terms of engagement with IMF, which is done by the SAMA and the Minister of Economy. And besides this, I suspect that the private sector will follow up. And Saudi is a top-down economy, so when they see the government acting a certain way, that's sufficient often for the private sector to take that as a signal and follow. So recently, the last delegation which came to Pakistan had 50 companies from the private sector which came to Pakistan. And so within a matter of like almost 2 months, there have been 3 or 4 high-level meetings between the Saudi government and Pakistan government at World Economic Forum. I just got back from Riyadh, as you know, today, and I was told by some of the friends who work in Saudi government that all the Saudi ministers were asked to meet the Pakistani Prime Minister at the World Economic Forum, including the governor of the central bank. Which shows you that on the Saudi side, this is a high priority engagement, and this is a serious engagement.
Yes, thank you for that overview, right? And that's it's good to hear those six sectors, because out of the six of them, I would sort of maybe put power to the side at this point. I'll explain why. But the other five of them kind of make sense from a returns on investment point of view. And the reason why I say that, right, is that you're looking at agriculture. Well, if Saudis invest in Pakistani agriculture primarily from a food security point of view, the goal will be to boost yields in specific crops like rice and wheat, etc., and do some value addition or processing in Pakistan, take it to Saudi Arabia and create the final product. Well, there's no currency mismatch, right? So it's essentially a dollar investment for a dollar return on the asset. So it solves the problem there. Same thing with Rico Dig. Similar thing with logistics in terms of the flow of goods, particularly if it's linked to the mining sector. Same for the refinery. Power sector, we kind of know, you and I have had long conversations offline on sort of like how and why Pakistan needs to change the way in which the power sector works. And there's a currency mismatch there, right? Borrowing or equity in dollars, earnings in rupees leads to the liquidity crisis we see time and time again. You mentioned that, for example, on the refinery side, the holdup was the refinery policy, and now that's been done. On the Pakistani side, at this point in time, what is your read of like what is the delta between interest and conversion into deals? Like what needs to happen in Islamabad, for example, to make sure that these high level engagements don't just stop at the engagements, which has been the case, right? As you said, there's skepticism and cynicism primarily because this started in the Imran Khan era and we're in 2024. So what has to happen on the Islamabad side to make this go to the next level?
Yes, so the refinery project is probably even predates the Imran Khan era. I met the gentleman who said he initiated the project on the Saudi side. Now he's a retired person, so it goes back even more in time. So historically, Saudi's disappointment or their complaint have been that Pakistan's bureaucracy has not been forthcoming, and the rules and the regulations don't allow easy foreign investment to come in, and they don't give enough protection to the foreign investors. So that was one of the complaints which was recurring for in the past. Then political uncertainty became an issue in the whole Imran Khan saga. That went when Shahbaz Sharif's government came, that also led to the creation of SIFC. And if you notice, SIFC's verticals are also exactly in line with the verticals in which the Saudi engagement is. So I think one of the main objectives of SIFC was that it was born out of a promise, out of engagement with Saudi Arabia, that
I'm smiling because maybe we call it the Saudi Investment Facilitation Council then, and not the special as an acronym.
Yes, I feel that it must have born out of engagements between Pakistani establishment and the Saudi government, because this was the time when Pakistan was trying to avoid the default. We were constantly going to them saying that give us more money. They were saying we can give you investment, but you solve these issues. So I think Pakistani side at that time promised that we will set up this structure, we will solve all the problems, we will move fast. So actually, the refinery policy, incidentally, was passed on the last day of Shahbaz Sharif's PDM government before the caretaker came in. So that shows how high priority this was. So things have moved. They've moved in the right direction. For example, politically we are more stable now compared to how things were past, and then we can argue whether this is really stable or not. But still, from 12 months ago, this is an improvement. The Saudi recognize it. They know that they recognize at least that there is a elected government on our side. One complaint, for example, which they used to make publicly was that they used to say that you've had like 4 or 5 finance ministers over the last 2 years. So, and every finance minister who comes calls and asks for help for money. So I think the promise from our side was that there will be consistency, there will be improvement in bureaucracy to facilitate this interaction. And now the pace of movement from Saudi side shows that at least they're comfortable to move ahead on this. And one of the meetings I just had last night before coming, Saudi minister said to me that, look, I told you that we were working on all of this, and the pace from our side shows that, or proves that we were prepared, you guys were not. And now, because you are ready, and that's why we can move very fast. So, to answer your question, that what's the holdup? I think the mining project will be announced soon. There were some technical issues on that, and more in terms of, from what I heard, was that there was some earlier offtake agreements with the banks who had provided refinancing on it. The Japanese and the British Exim banks had provided some kind of credit guarantees, but with that credit guarantees, they had also gotten contracts for offtake of the material, which of course the Saudis want. So that's why they had to be redone, and new banks had to be introduced, Islamic Development Bank, perhaps. So I think that deal will be announced soon. And I similarly think the agriculture movement will happen soon. But there, beyond that, I think it's not just one way. And then what excites me more about the Saudi engagement is the participation of Pakistan and Pakistani people and Pakistani companies in Vision 2030. You know, you the important thing is not that Saudis should invest in Pakistan. They should if they get a good return. The last thing you want is for them to invest in a place and then lose their money, because if that happens, they will never invest again. So it's what is more promising is that Pakistani talent is going to Saudi, getting jobs over there. Now when I deal with the financial markets in Saudi, almost 40 to 50% of the people I interact with in most of the asset managers and banks are Pakistanis, and a lot of them have just gone over the last 12 months. So certainly there's a exodus of Pakistanis going to Saudi, getting good jobs, and playing a role in Vision 2030. So that's one. The second thing is, now recently I've seen a lot of Pakistani companies approach us and ask for help in finding good assets in which they can invest in Saudi Arabia, especially in hospitality, construction, real estate sectors. So I think for me that's more promising in terms of building bilateral relationships rather than just the one-sided investment flow.
I think that's a very important point, right? I mean, even in the US-Pakistan relationship, what I often tell people is that good economics makes for great bilateral relationships. If there's no good, and by good economics, it has to be win-win, as you said, right? Like, you don't want Saudis or any investor, domestic or foreign, to lose and consistently get sour on a market, because if they do, then that's a bad signal for everybody else, right? And if you're gonna, if let's say we were to fast forward 5 years from now, and it's a situation where the Saudis are not particularly happy about how deals turned out, well, the question any foreign investor will ask, right? Let's say an Australian foreign investor will say, well, Saudi Arabia and Pakistan had a strategic relationship, and if their investors got screwed over, if I were to be blunt in my use of language, then what's in it? What's the guarantee for us, right? That's what people ask. That's how it works. But I think your point about talent going the other way, businesses going the other way, is far more important. I agree with you, because that underpins the relationship, not ties between the government or the intelligence agencies or the military, right? Because those things change over time. It's ultimately good economics that underpins the relationship. Another thing, Ali, you said, which I want to touch a bit upon, is the Saudis are also engaged with the IMF. As we know, and as the audience knows, budget is coming up in Pakistan. That will be a very important milestone to determine where the next IMF program goes. Roughly, let's say $8 billion or so, give or take, is what the contours are right now that are being discussed. What's the nature of Saudi sort of engagement with IMF? Is it very similar to, in your read, of how it happened with Egypt, where there was a financing gap, and that financing gap had to be met by countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE as part of their investment agreements? Is that really the contour, or something, what exactly is Saudi Arabia working with the IMF on this topic?
And then before coming to that, I just want to add to the previous point because I think it's quite important that often we feel the narrative in Pakistan often revolves around that Pakistan is important for Saudi because of Pakistan's army, uh, which of course may be true as well and might be a strong reason for Saudi engagement. But I think the principal reason is that the Saudis have good Pakistanis have good reputation with Saudis. So it links to the point which you just said that Pakistani talent which is already working there. There are around 2 million Pakistanis living over there. They are known for being hard workers. And this is not just white collar workers, and then these are even people who go and especially from KPK and work as manual labor in building the cities and building the pipelines and being the construction workers over there, the taxi drivers over there. They are known for being for their hard work. Similarly, in the financial markets where I work, as in Pakistanis are quite industrious workers. They work long hours. They have serious jobs with high, where the role has substantial contribution to the Saudi society. The third governor of the Saudi Central Bank was a Pakistani. So I think because of that, Saudi Arabia, in my travels, I've seen it's one of the few places, if perhaps not the only place, where I have seen so much respect for Pakistani talent. Even in technology, they think that Pakistanis are geniuses. I don't get that kind of reputation of Pakistanis in any other market. Like even in UK, they'll think that an Indian is better than Pakistani or a German is better than Pakistani. But in Saudi Arabia, I do feel that they have a lot of respect for Pakistani talent, especially for its hard work. So, and I think that's perhaps the primary reason why they want to engage with Pakistan, because Pakistani people who have gone there have already contributed, and they've shown that Pakistan can contribute to Vision 2030. So I just wanted to add that, because army is one part of it, but Pakistan as a nation and Pakistan as a society and Pakistanis as people and their track record of contributing to Saudi Arabia is I think, a major part of this fondness of Saudi Arabia with Pakistan. Now, coming to your question on IMF, I feel it's similar to what you just said, that they always have to give some kind of guarantee that they will roll over the debt. But also IMF, from what I understood in terms of when I talk with people, my friend at Sama, is that Saudi Arabia also has votes, significant votes in IMF, and Pakistan needs those votes as well. So the Saudi desk at IMF is always involved in the conversation around Pakistan. So I don't know that so far did they have to give explicit commitments in terms of committing to the funding gap. From the chatter I hear, and I don't know whether this chatter is true or not, but this is just when you are in the field, you hear things. I think the US might have played a bigger role in filling that funding gap in terms of giving IMF some kind of support that funding gap would be filled, more than what Saudi Arabia would have played. But certainly, as a debtor, as a creditor to Pakistan, you need assurances from Saudi Arabia, UAE, and China that they will facilitate some kind of restructuring of their sovereign debts to Pakistan.
And I would assume also, right, like if the Saudis are considering significant investments in Pakistan, that they also want to make sure how the IMF is thinking about the overall outlook as well, right? I mean, you wouldn't want to, we've talked about this, like if your currency is overvalued by 30% or even 10%, why would a foreign investor want to invest at that point in time when there's an imminent depreciation to get it back to fair market value, right? And so Saudis probably want to stay aware of that as well.
Yes, so Saudis should not do stupid investments, and Pakistan should not ask for from stupid investments. I feel that in the past, like when I engage with some of the former people in the government, they always say, "Oh, Saudis should just give us money." I think we should not even try to engage on those lines. We should be aware of Vision 2030. We should be aware of the commercial and economic needs of Saudi Arabia, and we should engage with them with a viewpoint of how can we help Saudi Arabia achieve its goals in Vision 2030. That's how most other countries engage with Saudi, and I hope that Pakistan should engage with that, because that, I think, one of the reasons why there might have been a gap, and this is your earlier question, that where the gap is. I think one of the gap, it might be that it took us longer to understand what Saudi needs and what are we talking about. So there's no handouts. They have publicly said that. Their economic minister publicly said it at World Economic Forum last year. So we should not ask for those. We should go with credible, profitable, and attractive investment propositions. And we should also, as you rightly said, that we should try to assure that if any kind of foreign investment comes, whether it's from Saudi or whether it's from any other country, we should try to assure that whatever commitments we give, we deliver on those, and we should try to make sure that investors make a return on it, so that it creates a positive track record.
Oh, I fully agree. And in fact, one of what I often tell Pakistani policymakers, right, is one of the best or lowest hanging fruits that they have on offer right now is just having fast track business courts. The fact that contract enforcement and intellectual property rights and things like that, very mundane stuff in other parts of the world, get stuck in the judicial system. I think in the Khan government, Punjab pushed an ordinance to establish these courts, but then they never legislated on it, so the ordinance expired. But it's a very low, it's a very easy common sense reform, right? Like, you're an investor, doesn't matter domestic or international. But if there's a business dispute, like let's have a mechanism to enforce the law and enforce the terms of the contract and protect your intellectual property in a quicker way, because that's a very easy unlock for investment, because that's the first thing investors look for. Like, okay, what's the rule of law like? If somebody breaks their contract, what am I going to do tomorrow in this jurisdiction, right? And very easy problem to solve. But your point on like stupid investments, that's a very good one, because something that I heard almost 3 years ago, and I still felt there was a gap. And Musharraf Zaidi, our common friend, has written about this multiple times as well, that PIF now is not in the business of handing out money to anybody. PIF is in the business of investing for a return of investment, because this is the wealth of the Saudi people that must be protected. They have a duty towards the owners of that asset, which is ultimately the people of Saudi Arabia. And so they will make the best choice that is there on commercial terms. What was also interesting to me, I had a conversation almost 3 years ago with an interlocutor from Saudi Arabia, and they were very blunt in the sense that their point was, look, we're not asking Pakistan to do anything we ourselves are not doing, which is go for common sense economic reforms, include women in the workforce, make good policy, improve ease of doing business, and just clamp down on corruption and bad actors. Like they're like, we're not telling you to do anything that we ourselves are not trying to do. So let's work together on this, right? And I think finally, perhaps there's some recognition of that issue in Pakistan as well.
That this is so important what you just said, that for me, that $25 billion which we speak about in terms of G2G investment, that's actually trivial. What is more important is Pakistan learning from Saudi Arabia about how to do reforms. Saudi was a place where we thought that these things can never happen. Like it was more conservative, more closed, more hardline. And now that economy, which did not even have a tourist visa until 2019, now has more than 100 million tourists visiting it. Right? Women were not allowed to drive, and now women are in so many positions of power and perhaps are driving most of the change. The chairman of the stock exchange, the ambassador to the US, are ladies. They are staff, sports women in various sports. So I think I hope that Pakistan can actually learn from Saudi in those things. We need to learn how to increase our tourism. We need to learn how to make a more liberal society, more in society with greater women participation in labor force. And I think those kind of knowledge transfer can actually have a more positive impact in Pakistan than the $25 billion investment. And I think Pakistan, beyond the business courts and the protection for foreign investors, we need to we need to start celebrating wealth creation. I think the biggest problem is that whenever anybody makes money in Pakistan, we start questioning that. Whether it's Chinese, whether it's Americans, whether it's Pakistanis, whenever somebody generates any kind of profit, it somehow carries a stigma. And then that stigma builds up into some kind of public narrative, which gets covered by media. Then judges jump on that, so it becomes more of a social narrative that recently, for example, there's this hue and cry about Pakistanis owning property in Dubai, and then owning property in Dubai is not a crime, right? Like not paying taxes or having illicit wealth is a crime, but not owning property cannot be a crime. So, but I unfortunately I feel that the bigger problem we have is that we don't celebrate wealth creation. We believe that any kind of wealth creation is because of some crime, and that's why we need to change the rules to take the money back, whether it's the power contracts or whether it's the Chinese investment or whatever investment. We want to then go and use the courts to retrieve the money which has been made by businesses who have done business in Pakistan.
Yeah, I think
And
that's
with
where
that
the
kind of concept, what do you think?
I fully agree, and that's the broader issue. I think we've seen this play out in India as well over the years, changing. Now wealth creation is more and more celebrated, but there's still like that underlying issue, right? And that big plays in politics of like "Sood boot ki sarkar" is the big sort of issue that comes up in Indian conversation on the political side. But I think the Dubai leak stuff that you mentioned like is an interesting case in point, right? Because I was watching somebody's conversation yesterday on this topic where the pushback back was exactly what you said. Owning property by essence is not crime. There's a long way to go between showing somebody owns an asset abroad and then proving that it was illicit or something illegal happened. And there's a process that has to be followed, which in Pakistan's case, a lot of times is not followed. I mean, I remember, and you will more remember this more clearly than I do. When the Panama Papers came out, it all became about Nawaz Sharif, but there are hundreds of other people from Pakistan in the Panama Papers leaks as well. And we to this day don't know what happened of that investigation. But I think that's where the noise. That's why I invite people like you to tell the signal from the noise. So this has been an interesting conversation. Before I let you go, last question on this, right? You mentioned that things are moving along. The Pakistanis seem to have realized that they gotta hold up their end of the bargain here, and they are the potentially recipient country here, so they gotta do a lot more of the legwork. What are some risks that you see or anticipate in the next few months that perhaps may lead us to have this conversation another year from now, saying another trip is expected, but nothing materialized? Like, what should people watch out for as signals that might suggest that uh, things are stalling once more?
So, first, I think the Saudis also recognize and appreciate that Shahbaz Sharif is uh, trying to work hard on making the Saudi to facilitate the Saudi investment. They like the fact that he shows them warmth. He tries to speak Arabic. He goes there. He brings the cabinet with him. SIFC is working. So there's a lot of engagement also from Pakistan side, which is giving confidence to the Saudi side. So that is being recognized. That's being reported, and the Saudis are talking about it. A friend at a very big institution, I don't want to name the institution, government institution, Saudi said that their directive is that anything related to Pakistan should be expedited. So from their side, they are moving fast. Now, from our side, um, um, our laws there, our regulation there, how fast can SIFC move? I think those things are important. But I think one thing which is really important, and that goes to the comment, your comment about the perhaps a postponement of the special visit which was supposed to happen. The Crown Prince has postponed his visit to the UK 3 times, but it was never his visits were never in the news, and they're never. He keeps them very discreet. I engaged with the UK embassy when those trips were happening. I was supposed to join one of those trips from a UK perspective, from the UK side. They never even used to say that he is coming. They used to say, "Oh, special guest is coming, a special visit is happening." So the Crown Prince is known for being a workaholic. He works all night. He makes people stay up all night. He travels from one city to another while people are waiting in Riyadh. They'll be waiting for him, and he'll be in Jeddah doing a meeting and then flying over. So right now he's gone to Japan. So he works very hard. He has a lot of targets to deliver on, and he does not like. I feel that he does not like his plans being talked about in the public. So I fear that the comments from Pakistani side, premature comments from Pakistani side announcing the trip before the Saudi side had announced it, perhaps might have had a role to play in this. So it goes back to the point that our side needs to be coherent. It needs to be more organized. It needs to be more professional, because we do have a tendency of doing photo ops and announcing things prematurely and putting headlines which might not be fully true. And in any kind of business engagement, such kind of juvenile things do lead to deals breaking apart, even in even commercial deals. That's why NDA exists, and that's why lawyers are involved in doing deals, because there's a process for it. So I hope that we keep the politics out of it. I hope that Pakistani side uses professional lawyers, uses professional financial advisors to engage with this, because even with the creation of SIFC, the people in SIFC, whether they are from the bureaucracy or from the army or from the government or the political side, they are not financial advisors, they are not investment bankers, they're not transaction bankers, and they're not lawyers. So I think Pakistan needs to engage professionals to do that engagement, which is what Saudi side does. If you look at their side, they use a lot of consultants, but they also use investment banks. Now, the the reason I think the deal will actually is the most promising one to close is perhaps because they're professional firms which have been advising all three parties, Barrick, government of Pakistan, and the PIF. So, and that's why perhaps you didn't see their names in the public, because they were doing all of these negotiations in the background, and nobody knew that when PIF was flying in and spending time in Islamabad and meeting the relevant stakeholders, it's not in the public domain. So I think we should engage on these things professionally, and that's where the risk is, that sometimes our political obligations and our political pressures force some of our political leaders to say things which might not be the right things to say in the public domain.
No, I fully agree. And I would say, ultimately, it's not even, I would say, it's a juvenile or a made-up political obligation. Like, what's the net output of prematurely announcing that the crown prince is coming? A 24-hour news cycle? News cycle in Pakistan moves in 12 hours. Like, 24 hours I'm being generous there, right? As you know. So if the news cycle is worth 12 hours, is this really worth, on the other side, creating a bad sort of taste in somebody else's mouth about you going out there first and announcing something? And then to our earlier, where we started, right, that the cynicism that exists among people, it partially exists because of these types of juvenile moves, right? You announce 50 billion, or tomorrow there's this amount coming, and then people say, okay, what happened? And then you don't have anything to say because you just wanted to create a news headline because somehow some genius thought this was good politics, which it isn't. So I agree with you. I hope that improves. And maybe in these instances, my advice to the government of Pakistan and political leaders in Pakistan would be, eventually it'll be the Saudis who will be investing in Pakistan. So let them make the announcements. And why don't you just stay silent and let it play out the way it does? And you don't have anything to say. Like that it is what it is. And when they announce it, you can then say, okay, look, we did hard work and we got the deals to materialize. Like, kudos to us. And that's what matters at the end of the day. So
Absolutely. But just one parting point, that I think the whole Saudi engagement is very positive. It's very real. It's serious. I'm very optimistic about it. 18 months ago, I opened up my company in Saudi Arabia. We are doing quite well over there, which shows how big the opportunity is. As I told you, many Pakistanis have migrated to Saudi, doing great jobs. I get messages on LinkedIn now that we heard your podcast and that encouraged us to apply to Saudi, and now we are in Riyadh. So all of that makes me very optimistic. And lastly, the feedback which I get from CEOs of Saudi companies, the Saudi people in senior positions over there, when I see their warmth for Pakistan, their love for Pakistan, their affection for Pakistan, uh, that moves me. Like, it's something which is surreal, something which I've never seen before. I met a Saudi billionaire. He kept on, a very big philanthropist, and he kept on saying that Pakistan was such a great country in the past, in the 70s, and I got a little frustrated by his reputation of that point, because I felt that perhaps he was being patronizing. But later on, I found out that he had lived in Pakistan in the 70s, and his company was involved in building up a Faisal Mosque. So these guys have real affection for Pakistan. One of the few places where I see that kind of affection. I heard Turkey has something similar. I've not seen that much in Turkey, but I do engage with the Saudis, so I do see it, and I hope that Pakistan can. It's very, very important for our future generations that the current engagement uh, turns out to be a positive engagement for the Saudis. You don't want them to lose money right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that your point on the gentleman who was talking about the 70s reminded me of a must-read book. If you haven't read it, everyone should read it. It's called The Afghanistan File, written by Prince Turki bin Al Faisal Al Saud, who ran the entire sort of Soviet jihad era policy on the Saudi side. And this is a very interesting book because in Western academia syllabuses, or people who pay attention to what happened in Afghanistan over the last 40, 50 years, um, the narrative is primarily told from the lens of the West, which is important, but it misses the point of view of the other actors involved. And in this case, the Afghanistan file tries to show the point of view of the Saudis in terms of how they were approaching and how they were working with the CIA and the United States and others, and what went wrong, and how what went wrong led to the outcome that ultimately led to 9/11 and another invasion of Afghanistan. So it's a very important read in that sense. But your point reminded me, Ali, was if you read that book, one of the most interesting bits that stood out to me in that book was how Prince Turki talked about Nawaz Sharif and Pakistan as a whole. It was a very positive view in terms of how he worked with the Pakistanis, in particular with Pakistani leaders, in particular Nawaz Sharif, because he was a big part of this puzzle in that overall conversation that the Saudis were having. And that makes you rethink about the fact, right? Like at a time when people are very disillusioned in Pakistan, see everything very cynically, and rightfully so, there are valid causes for that. You kind of realize that there is another way to look at it, in the sense that Pakistanis can and do good things, and others do appreciate it, especially allies from countries like Saudi Arabia. And so, I wanted to recommend that book to folks as well, because it's a very interesting take to, and echoes what you were describing as well.
Thank you. I'll read that book.
Yeah. So with that, again, thank you so much for taking out the time. This was a wonderful conversation, and I think as things move forward, as you said, we'll keep an eye out on what happens with this investment and the flow of the growth of this relationship, and we'll have you back on soon enough to talk about what comes next. So in the meantime, thank you and Khudafis.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. Hafiz.